Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today to talk about something that I recently discovered and made me change a little bit the way I do things, especially in my team. Being an engineering manager makes me think a lot about how I do things in my team, how I handle tech, and how I talk to my team about changes. And also at the same time, having a team full of front-end engineers makes me think a little bit about who would be running the bloody backend code, which is fun, but interesting at the same time. Again, I'm Sam, or Houssam. I'm an engineering manager at Fandom, and I'm very pleased today that Fandom is also keep on support for meet.js, and hopefully we keep doing that for the longest term. And hopefully the market will be good enough for us to do so. A little bit about myself. Actually, I love JavaScript and I have a very complicated relationship with it since 2013. I'm having some fun while scaling stuff at Fandom, and I just love to do park walking. And that's kind of my love triangle that I have with myself. So let's talk a little bit about Remix.js and why that is really important. And the first part will be developer experience. Stop making your developer's life miserable. Developers really love to do a lot of things regarding working with cool technologies. And the developer experience here can be very much interesting and become an increasingly talked about topic, especially when you are working with different stacks. How you are making sure that your developers and your team in general have the best experience while learning new things or working with new stuff. So then now we are talking about something called the developer experience. Similar to the user experience means that we definitely don't want to make our developer's life miserable, so we just want to improve it using the right set of tools. Opinionated is not actually bad. React is very much opinionated. Redux is extremely opinionated, and means that having an opinionated way of doing things is actually take less of decision fatigue out of your developer's life. So yeah, wipe the decision fatigue away from developers and give them a way of doing things. If you are like me, who are really passionate about doing tech while trying to give your developers or your team a lovely experience while working with you, you would definitely want to give them something more opinionated so they can take away of all those meeting time and decision-making process during your tech refinement. So opinionated is actually not that bad. And simplicity is key. When we are talking about how we build applications, we are now in a very interesting market where we want to have simple things that do the right trick. So simplicity is going to be key. Zero to hero in no time is essential and important. We are not just want to make product for the sake of it. 6 months MVP is no more. 6 months MVP is become actually a de facto in the last few years, but that's actually really bad. Remember, we are living in very weird market since COVID, and we want to act very quickly. So we want to prototype and reach to an MVP level in a very, very fast time. And actually, Remix give us some of that. And also, performance really matters, because performance equals money. Trust me, I know that best. At Fandom, we are working with over 300 million users every day. My team manages the whole, what you see on Fandom. If you go to Fandom, you will see the whole wiki experience. You will see the whole front-end level. And you will see that performance there really matters. We recently started to do some interesting quest, and I call it the quest for 1 second. The quest for 1 second took us to a whole brand new, or a brand new way to talk about performance and how we want to do things in a brand new level. Why? Because we figured out that only 1 second is, when you have the right scale, will be translated in millions of dollars. Not thousands, but millions. So performance here and keeping performance in mind is really important. Google says that any application or any SaaS or any or web application for that matter takes that more than 2 seconds. It's just simply going to be bad for the user experience. and it will simply going to demote it when it comes to SEO. And if you are heavy on SEO and heavy on being part of that first look on the search engine, you would definitely want to make your web vitals vitals. So that's something that I want to talk about now. So we have 4 elements that I look for whenever I test any kind of new framework or test even new technologies. And that's where Remix come to the mix. So how you actually can create a Remix application? It's very simple. You just go to your lovely bash, and you can simply do npx create remix as the latest, and you're going to have the latest of the latest of the remix. Now we are in version 2. Moving forward, I want to talk a little bit about the app composition. So let's suppose that we create the application. Now let's talk about how the application will actually look like. For that, I don't know if you are, like me, fan of Star Wars, but I'm a big fan of that. I don't know if you know about something called Jedi Order or the Jedi High Council records, but this is the place where all the Jedis actually go to get their records from if they want to investigate something. So we have Din Grogu here, who actually really wants to check for some of the Jedi's records. And he's very keen into finding a new master, because Mandalorian master is not that great with a lightsaber, if you ask me. So if you go to access record, we are simply going to start looking for data, and we're going to start having our records. So we can check a lot of things that is happening. So a lot of things happened in those 2 clicks. Going back here, I started to have my first re-rendering or fetching here the moment I click. And I will show you how to do that and why that is really important and cool. Moving to the code itself. And let's talk a little bit about the application structure. So whenever you create a Remix application, you're going to have very simple things. And by the way, Remix lets you do server-side rendering. And if you ask me, that's actually really cool and important. Because for some people who really loves to remove JavaScript away from the browser and have a plugin for it, we have something about it here. Server-side rendering is simply going to be your business savior, because everything will be rendered on the server, which is fun. And meaning that you are not going to lose onto that visit experience. Because even if though people really want to remove JavaScript away from the equation, you are still going to give them a decent experience. So whenever you create an interesting new application with Remix, you're going to get the following. So you're going to get an app folder. You get your build and public files. You're going to get your package.json, which is very standard. And you get something like called remix.js or remixconfig.js, which we have most of the things that you would expect here. And also, you're going to have some environment variable here for just mostly for typing and TS, because we are simply working with TypeScript here. Some interesting ESLint rules here. But that's pretty much the standards. Moving forward within the application itself, you're going to get some files here that I would explain. So when it goes to the root file here, and I did something really interesting. I just made sure that I run Chakra on top of my application, because I wanted to have a decent UI experience. Chakra is Bootstrap for the old people if you don't know what Chakra means. But Chakra just gives you a set of styles, a set of icons, a set of stuff. So it's very also opinionated about how UI should be created. And I just did the whole management here to make it run. And when you do that, you're going to have your function.app, where it's going to be a document, and my document is simply going to be hydrated using emotion, and you're going to be managing the styles, managing the codes, and everything in between. And you're going to have your standard HTML page with children, so it's going to be the components, and scoring restoration for simply your to give your users some score restoration. Scripts and love reload if you are in the localhost. Moving forward, we're going to get 2 interesting files. You're going to get the entry.client file and the entry.server file. And the entry.server file is simply going to be your server, where all your server can be running. Now, I'm running on what Remix gave us as a server here. And in this case, I don't want to do any fancy stuff. Why I could, but I just don't want to. I wanted to keep it like a normal application for front-end engineer to understand. So I would just do nothing but return a new response. I give it just the type HTML and return in the markup. And that's going to be it with some status and headers. Easy stuff. The client side. On the client side, I'm doing nothing but simply loading some hydration here. I'm also using a little bit of props with styles and adding some caching for emotions. just mostly for the style part. So because I have some light, dark style here, because Chakra supports that out of the box. And I have also some context. So this is mostly about the style itself, nothing fancy. When I load the application itself, I will going to see that I have a new thing called routes. And Remix.js, in the nutshell, is nothing but React router plus a backend. And this React router is actually the backbone of the whole thing here. It gives you a set of ways to create your application. So if you are familiar with React router and how you can create routes in React router, you will find it extremely similar here. And in my case, I have this index router. So underscore index is going to be my slash, or the root directory, or the root route that I have here. Well, from the code itself, you'll find that I have a couple of meta functions because, by the way, I can give this meta function here right away directly in the component level. And then I will simply going to get a vstack with an image, and that's going to showcase the high order, the Jedi Order Council logo, because they had those things back in the days. And at the same time, I have a link which goes to a button. This button simply got to access the record. So let me showcase back or go back here. So I'm talking about this one. Same time, I have this interesting thing where I want to prefetch things on the fly. So Remix gives me the ability to prefetch data and also prefetch the module itself by simply using the prefetch to be intent. Of course, we do have other things that we can prefetch, or other technique or other strategies. This strategy will be the viewport, means that we're going to load this whenever we are in the viewport, means whenever we are checking the component itself, or we can just do it in the rendering time, or we just do none if you just want to make your user miserable, which I don't think you will. So you just prefetch things on the fly and just hope the user will click next. So this is mostly it from an app point of view. I have a couple of other things here. So I have, whenever I want to check a particular Jedi, so I just want to have two things here. The first one will be the records. So when I go to the records, I will simply go to /records, where I'll be getting my records here. So how I'm fetching this? I have two components. The first one will be records. And in the Remix world, if you just say record.tsx, you are simply going to go directly to the main file or the main route, which is going to be our /records, which means in this page. And I'll be speaking about how I'm getting the data and everything between in a few. So I'm doing nothing but grabbing some data, looping through it, giving the key, so React don't scream at me, and that's going to be it. If I want to check a particular record, means that it's going to be record/ID or /whatever, following the same way that Remix give us this particular routing, and we said do records.$signs with character, and that's going to be it. So it's very similar, very simple way of running your routes. Again, you can do it this way, which is very much in your face, but at the same time, you can do it differently using a directory situation, which is going to be mostly like developer friendly. But if you are like me and you want things directly in your face, you don't want to do anything besides simply put them there, and it will just make sense. So this is mostly from an app structure point of view. Now, it's all about routing. So like I said, Remix.js is all about routing your application or creating an application with a router. So it's like a router plus a backend on top. And Remix gives us actually two types of routing. The first one is component routes, and the second one is resource route. So in Remix world, every component is its own API. So now you'll be thinking, oh, we are doing the PHP stuff, where we load everything on the same thing, on the same page. It's kind of similar, but it gives us ability to put everything in one place for component. So every component is going to be its own API. The second one will be resources. Resource API is every API that doesn't have a UI to it. So we can have two things here, a UI plus an API route, or data layer management, or simply the route without any kind of front end behind it. And for that, we need to see how we can actually fetch the data. And how am I supposed to get the data now if I'm talking to a component equal an API? So let's go back to our code, and let's look at this thing. So in Remix, every component will have two things, a loader and an action. In our case, if we want to grab the data, we're simply going to declare a new thing or a new function called loader. This loader, it will be actually acting as your backend. So if you want, oh, it's not showcasing. Oh, let me get out of here. Ah, thank you. So in your backend, so if you want to put some data on the backend level, you will just go and create, for instance, now we are on the record layout, and we want to grab the records. I'm just going to set or declare something called loader. And in the loader, I just want to put whatever backend code I want to have and just put it there, grab data, access a database, access a table, do some kind of GWT management or whatever I want to do. I will just simply do it on the loader level. So now I'm doing nothing but the following. I'm declaring a loader. I'm going to get character from Star Wars API, which is actually defined here in a place called services. And I just have a function. I'm exporting a function that will simply ping the Star Wars API to get some people. And then after that, I will simply do the normal parsing, because it's going to be giving us a JSON, it is fetch, so it's going to be using the normal fetch parsing. After that, if I have some results, I will just, if I have nothing, I will just say, there is no characters here with the status of 404, because this is backend work, not front end. If so, if everything is okay, I'm just returning JSON from the results and give it like a header for cache control, because I don't want to reboot. I just want to cache something on the back on the browser, and that's going to be it. So now this code will actually work on the backend level. But now I want to access it. I want to access my this data on my API or my component level. For that, I have an interesting hook called use data loader. And this code data loader will be smart enough to know that, oh, I'm in a component and I want to access some data. Because a component is its own API, I'll just go and grab the data from this particular route, which is records. So I will grab the data that comes here. And because I want it to be type safe, I will just give it a type of loader, which is going to be our loader. So everything is going to be, the type is going to be defined on flight time. And that's going to be it. After that, I'll be having an access to all the data. I can loop through it and then simply loop it. And that's exactly what's going on here. So if you're going to see our data, I will see this following. So whenever I'm here in this record, I'm doing an HTTP request directly to my backend. I'm getting the payload, so I'm just doing the payload. I'm telling Remix I want to access the data, and this is code that will be executed in the loader level. And then I will simply going to get all my Jedis here. So this is code will be executed on the backend side, given to the front end, and that's going to be it. So this is mostly what we will get from a loader side. So it's very simple. You do nothing but defining your loader, and bam, you have data. Now, this is mostly from the data fetching point of view. What if I want to make an action? What if I want to submit something to the backend again? And for that matter, I will just need to declare an action. Now, oh, let's go back here. What in the frick? Okay, so now let's suppose that I am here in this particular great UI of mine, and being a very good Jedi, and I'm in the outer realm, I just want to report something to the high order and say, listen, we have some problems going on here, and I don't know if I can act on it or not, but I just want to report an incident. So it said, my master sucks. Report detail, no. Lightsaber skills. Where? In Tatooine, because why not? And then I want to submit this report to go to the backend level. So I will just submit the report. And then if I will check my backend, let me see what is. Okay, this is. Okay, let's go back here. Where is it? See, this is why live coding sucks. Nope. So let's do that again. I want to, again, in Tatooine. So now what I'm doing is just I sent a post request to the backend. But if you remember from what I said before, that every component is its own backend, this component, this particular component, have no URL access to it because it's an extra component. So for that matter, I want to report things. By the way, this is going to be this from data, simple stuff. And on the front-end level, I'm just going to get my data here. Now, where in the world I'm submitting this data to? Because, by the way, this is how I'm doing this. I'm just doing nothing but declaring a form, and then I'm doing something different. In Remix.js, once you send a post request, the data on that particular route will be automatically invalid. Meaning that Remix will be smart enough to know, oh, you did something to post in this particular component. OK, let me revalidate the data for you and then grab the new fresh data for you. But sometimes, only sometimes, we don't want to do that. Because in this case, I'm just sending a form, click, I don't have any data to refresh, any place to go to, so I just wanted to send it somewhere else without doing any front-end shenanigans. So in that matter, Remix gave us an interesting approach to do so, using a different hook called useFetcher. In the useFetcher, I'm creating a new form using it. So Remix should be saying, oh, you are creating a new form using the fetcher, means that you don't want to do anything with the front end from a validation point of view. Let me do that for you. It's going to be simply a form with a method post and action to my URL. Now, you'll be asking, what is that action, though? I'm not seeing it. This is not a component level. This is not an API. What is it? That's why we create something called a resource API, which is going to be this one. So I'm simply creating an action in this /reporting. I'm creating an action because this action is going to be, because whenever we post something or whenever we send the data, either post, put, delete, or patch, we're going to send it to an action. So I'm just doing nothing but accessing the request and then getting the form data, showcasing it, and bam, it's here on the backend level. But this one simply going to be acting individually from the whole application because there is no UI to it. And this is where I can do anything I want here because I can do a webhook request. I can create a webhook for me. I can create an API. I can do other things that I want to send to a backend that simply doesn't need to have a front end to it, which is very, very neat. Meaning that even if you are working with Remix, you are not deprived from your old backend stuff because in backend we have a lot of things. We can create bots, we can create jobs, we can create webhooks, normal backend stuff. And in this case, we are simply going to be able to do it without any problems. So this is where I'm sending the data, and this is how I'm handling the data. Now, you'll be saying, but what is state management? I really love Redux. I cannot live without sending an action to Redux. Like, if this is your life, I would say, like, no, you cannot have this because Remix simply takes away the state management away from you. Remember, every component will have its own API loader. Why do you really, and ask yourself, do you really need that store? Most of the time, the answer is no. You don't need to have a Redux store. You just don't need to create one. And if you really need to have a state in a component level, you can just use state. So again, this is a lot of opinionated things thrown at you at once without any further warning. But at the same time, it's just a matter of where to simply create applications without much hassle, using something that is extremely simple, as in post method, which is going to simply do it what the web world always did since the 90s. So this is how we create things in Remix. We rely on the API that we already have on the normal browsers, the normal web, without any fancy stuff that you actually don't need. So this is mostly from the data sending point of view. So you would say this is actually really simple. The thing is, it is. You just need to create a component, you create a loader, and then you create an action. And now you have an application. The rest will be to go Hand down your designers, hand down your web designers, grab them, create a nice UI for it, and just hook it up with some loaders and some actions, and you get yourself an MVP. Now, thank you very much. This actually was it. And as you can see, it's very simple to create application. Remember, Fandom are hiring. So if you are interested in joining my team or any team at Fandom, please scan the code or simply hunt me down on the booth outside. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a lot of helpful content. Let's sit around and have a chat, because I've already collected a bunch of questions.
Awesome.
And most of them are about the same thing. So let's start with, can we make a comparison with Next.js that we can finish before lunch? Like, can you give us a highlight? How is this significantly different? What's your main or favorite difference that this gives you that Next.js would not give you?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is actually a very fun story. Even the maintainers of Next.js don't like to talk about this one because there is no room of comparison here, in a good way, actually. Every framework or every framework have its own way to do things, right? Next are very much heavy onto their sticking to the React ecosystem, right? Which is fine, completely fine. Remix actually started with that. But Remix now, at the backbone of it, are trying to decouple things a little bit. Meaning, if you are like me, who thinks that React is really heavy, remember when you are dealing with more than 300 million users, 30 kilobytes of React is a lot. And you just want to jump to Preact. The interesting part here is, with the interesting variation of how Remix want to do things, they want to decouple themselves from the framework and become framework agnostic. And that's the thing that makes Remix different from Next. Next really love React. They invest there, and they have a lot of faith in the ecosystem, which is good, which is great, amazing. But at the same time, it's deprived the developer from chasing other things. Like, let's suppose in the future you want to use the same lovely stuff that Remix gave you, but maybe with Svelte, because you really want to test signals. You can actually do that because it's going to be very simple to decouple your backend or your framework from whatever choice of the front end you will have. Again, different types of routing, different ways of routing, different opinionated matter of getting data, which is fine. At the same time, Remix really focuses on the simplicity of having things. So to be not a fanboy here, I would just say the interesting part of it depends on your project. It depends on your teams. And just to be very frank, I'm also doing this for the longest. We know that companies really love to invest into things for the longest and not to change things, because rewriting stuff is really bad. But moving from a similar framework to a similar framework, we're not going to cost you that much, but rather make you work very fast. So that's how I would put the differentiation between the two. It really depends. But if you are really starting a new project from scratch, and you are not too keen into being agnostic to whatever a company behind Next.js is doing stuff, or you just don't want to invest in that ecosystem, because by the way, if you do want to invest in that ecosystem and it makes sense to you, please be my guest. This is the logical part here. But if you want to give yourself some creative liberty here, give yourself some ability to test other things to what makes sense to your business from performance point of view, and I cannot emphasize enough on the performance part, especially if you want to debug from React and go to other route, this is going to be a very interesting option for you.
Okay, that's very helpful, actually, because now we know what's the main thing to consider is, and it actually answers the top comment / question, but I want to bring it up anyway. It says, I have a feeling that in React, we want to remove React.
Here's the thing. I was actually saying this yesterday to a lot of people here. I might be one of the very small minorities who have very deep love to Angular. I love Angular. Why? Because simply it makes sense to me. Now, React has its way to do things, right? A lot of developers really love React because of what React provides. But from a holistic point of view, grabbing yourself away from the conversation and see what's going on, I see myself, when I go to my infrastructure, I see 30 kilobytes being invoked for 300 million users. For me, that's a problem. It's a very, very big problem for me, and I cannot handle it. So being able to be in a position to not kill React, but take the most out of React and go to something that is similar to React, but a little bit lighter, maybe Preact, I would just do that decision any time of the day. Because remember, the UI needs to be simple, decisive, and intuitive. Also agnostic. If you want to care about performance, performance needs to be a religion in your company. Especially if you are planning to grow. Especially if you are planning to scale to a larger and larger user base. The better decision you make before you start your project, the more thankful you'll be in the future. You don't want to run a task force every 6 months to fix performance. Companies does that, it's not great. So I would say focus more on what makes sense. Don't run after what's shiny, because shiny can be always a problem, because you are a company who wants to live for the longest, and having this React mindset in mind and just pick React because you just want to do React. Like there is no other point. You just want to do React. You really want to do React. You want to do React, meaning that you also want to do Redux. So why? The question is here, why? Do what makes sense to your business. Do what makes sense to your performance. And remember, 2 seconds is your de facto here. If your application takes more than 2 seconds in every geolocation. In Phantom case, we work in all the continents. We watch what happens to performance in every geographic session placement. The farthest it is, the more problems we have. Even though you can have CDNs, you can have a lot of things on top of it. React is a great option for developers because they can build UI on the fly. But do you really want to give your users a React instance every time they can join your website or check it? I would say no. So having these options to decouple your UI, be more agnostic, be more focused on what performance really gives you from framework to framework, that will be your de facto decision here. Not to pick React or to pick React, that is the question.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot of long questions here, so feel free to find our speaker at his desk near the entrance and ask those questions. I have one last question that's more like a yes or no, so we can squeeze it in. What if, as a result of a post, I need to update something else, like a cart? Will Remix handle that automatically?
So let me get the question right.
So there's a post happening in the form, and then there's also a widget showing the cart. Would that get updated automatically? Like, is Remix supporting you in building those behind-the-scenes interactions on your site?
That's why I was talking before about the data invalidation. So you can definitely rewire your data invalidation to work on each and every post, and that from that day on, you can simply invalidate any place you want outside of the box without any problems. So you have two ways: either invalidate on the fly because you are in a component API level, or you're simply going to invalidate everything by trade, or you want to re-invalidate whenever something happened. In that case, you can actually also wire that up. So I would say yes, but then would require some extra configuration.
Okay, thank you.